Hello, hello! We are back again for the first time in forever with a anime podcast. I have got here Justin.
That's me.
That's him.
With my iconic line.
Dude, how could you forget it? It's seared into my brain.
Yeah.
It's actually...
Cole finally let me out of the bad show basement after 2 long years.
Yeah. Been nothing but constant torture.
I mean, I had to watch Elfen Lied. I think that was the last podcast we did.
I think that was. Oh, God.
That is heinous.
Meanwhile, I'm watching How Not to Summon a Demon Lord and shit like that.
No,
it was kind of okay at some point.
Was that? Yeah, God,
it was
that
How Not to Summon a Demon
podcast.
Lord, and it was The Misfit at Demon King Academy, right?
Was that on the
that
same?
One?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I did 2 in the same one.
Crazy.
Yeah. What can I say? I'm a natural born masochist.
Natural born freak.
That one was funny because I really did come out of Misfit like, I mean, it kind of sucks, but I kind of liked it. I mean,
yeah, I try to make you watch bad shows, and then you're like, oh, well, if you just got past episode 9, it would have gotten better.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, my bad, man.
For sure. Yeah, my fault, bro. How could I be so foolish? It's doubly funny, too, because I'm such a big proponent of dropping shows when you stop liking them, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I'm like, under normal circumstances, I'd be like, oh yeah, Kanajo ga flag wa orare tada? Would have dropped that shit. It's not very good at all. But when you go even further beyond, it becomes a masterpiece, as you see.
Yeah, anyway, so we're here with Trigun because I said, Cole, if you make me watch another bad show, I'm quitting the podcast. So he was obligated to do something I like because this is one of my favorite shows. So
yeah, there's actually a masked gunman right behind me as we currently speak, and if I say the wrong thing, I will be killed within moments.
Indeed. Yeah.
Although
sorry.
I suspect this will be a rather uncontroversial podcast. I mean, it's Trigun. It's a good show. Spoiler alert. I really wish I would have found the time to read the manga for it as well.
Yeah.
I've heard the manga is significantly better even than the anime.
I've also heard that, but I have never gotten around to reading the manga.
Right, yeah.
So yeah, we won't really be talking about the manga nor Stampede. So I haven't watched that either.
Although I am, in fact, wearing a Trigun Stampede shirt right now. Because I found it at fucking FYE on the clearance section or whatever.
Yeah, this is specifically Trigun, released in 1998, which is crazy.
Yeah. God, the anime was 1998?
Yeah.
Whew. I remember I just had the wiki pulled up. The manga was 95 to 96. So,
yeah, and the anime is kind of a weird adaptation. Like I haven't read all of the manga, but it was
Madhouse, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't read all the manga, but from my understanding, it sort of follows the plot, but it also doesn't in some spots. So, like there are some notable changes. I didn't go through and look at all of them because I will probably read the manga someday, and I'm like, oh, that's different. That's cool.
Right. Yeah, I have heard roughly that going from the manga to the anime is similar to going from the original anime to Stampede in terms of like how much is different and what is lost, which depending on the person is a big deal, right?
Yeah. I didn't Stampede. I think I didn't really hear anything bad about it. It kind of went for the CG art style, kind of akin to like Guilty Gear type animation, I guess. I don't know how else I'd explain it, but
yeah, they did a pretty decent job with it from what I can tell. I mean, it's obviously not what you would like to see the most, but it's not Berserk 2016, right?
Yeah.
Like it overall looks pretty smooth, and like they use it to good effect still and whatnot.
I think the only thing I really heard about Stampede is Inspire Shmuel, because I follow him on Twitter. I think I remember him talking about it for a while when it was coming out.
Right, yeah. I don't quite remember what all he's... I think he has read the manga.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's like a big Trigun fan. I don't know. Our one-time podcast guest for the Chainsaw Man season.
Yeah. Fuck, I should have got him on here. I was just talking with him the other day about having him on another one.
Yeah, we should. That was a fun one.
Yeah. We'll have to do another seasonal or some shit, though.
Yeah, they better start releasing, like, more interesting seasonal shows, though, first.
Dude, I know. Gavin and I have been keeping up with seasonals kind of, sort of, the last year or so, but it's like, there's just not that much that's interesting. It's either all sequels or it's just, like, new shows that are not super unique kind of thing. Which
And then there's instant death skill.
Yeah, dude. Oh, man. We might have to talk about that on a podcast or something.
It's pretty funny.
So, specifically what we're referring to, because it's not easy to tell because there's 12 other shows with the same type of name. The show that aired like half a year ago that was called My Instant Death Skill is Overpowered in This World Too. Genuinely, one of the funniest seasonal group watches I have watched in years. It blew my expectations away with how fun it was to watch consistently. It's really stupid, but just bordering the line where it's like good enough that it was fun. Like,
yeah, like usually the thing where it kind of differed, and we could talk about it more another time. But it's like most of these like gimmick isekais abandon their gimmick like 4 episodes in, or it's like, right, actually, it's not what they thought it was, but no, it just kind of is the entire time, and it's pretty funny. So
yeah, dude. Like, you're just like, well, okay, it's got weaknesses. Like, surely it can't. No, it can. It can. I mean, it's just so good. It's so funny. I would highly recommend it. I think you would get more mileage out of it the more people you watch it with as well. I watched it with Gavin and Ishi, and Justin watched it by himself, so he probably had slightly less fun time than we did, but,
Correct.
It was cool.
But anyway, Trigun, which
Trigun.
is why we're here. It's a big podcast gap, there's just a lot to talk about. Anyway, so I watched this show originally back when I was probably like 14 or something. And it had been sitting on my mallet as a 10 since I was 14, and I never rewatched it. I'm now 24 for reference. And I was like, so I rewatched it again for this podcast because I was like, maybe it won't be, one of my favorite shows ever again on a rewatch. But no, it's pretty much right where it was. So
yeah, it's a really good series. I also started it a long time ago when I was like, how when you're getting into anime and you finally get to that point where like you don't just watch like the most popular thing your friend talks about.
Yeah.
And like you start just actually like, okay, what are shows people like talk about? What are shows that are old and popular? What are shows that are supposed to be really good? Stuff like that. For me, that was probably like 2014-ish or so. And so Trigun was something I started around then. But I only ever got like, I don't know, like 5-6 episodes in maybe. And I just didn't keep up with it because I was watching a bunch of other random shit at the time, right? But I had liked it and I had been meaning to finish it. And now that I have finished it, I am glad to have done so. It was a very cool series. I think the easiest thing to talk about is the sound design and the art direction is so fucking good on this series.
Yeah, and I distinctly remember for a long time, I'm like, Cole, why have you watched like 5 episodes of Trigun and just finish it sometime?
Yeah.
But yeah, so like Trigun, the art is just so good. I don't know. The art and the soundtrack and sound design, like Cole pointed out, is fantastic. I would say probably when I first watched it, I was like, this show is like a strong 10. Like, there's no doubt in my mind. It's like one of my favorite things. My rewatch, I'd probably say it's like more in maybe the 9.5 range. It's probably still a 10. Just because like the animation at times there's not animation sometimes.
Yeah, it's animated like an old show that doesn't have a ridiculous budget like a couple of them had or whatever, but like where they really cut corners in like the dialogue scenes and whatnot, and then when it's supposed to look good or something's happening, then it actually does look good.
Yeah, and the thing was, there are spots where I was like, oh, they just didn't really animate this, but I'm sitting here looking at this art and I do not care. So
yeah, I vastly prefer this approach. If you have to cheap out somewhere, I vastly prefer this to like the more modern style of just like it. Like generally, things are always kind of moving and whatnot, but they don't look that great.
Yeah, right.
Like I think it's completely fine to have like an on and off. Although, I suppose it is kind of the exact same thing I criticize in like something like Demon Slayer, where I'm like, there's an episode every 6 episodes that looks good actually, and the rest are just like funny haha stand talk.
But, I just, as far as like Demon Slayer art style, not nearly as impressive to me. It's like stylistic and it does look good at times, but Trigun is that perfect, like late 90s, early 2000s art style that I just love. So
yeah, that cell shaded stuff that we're never going back to.
The good old days.
Yep. Definitely also like it's just the frequency. Like I said with Demon Slayer, it feels more like it's like you will go literal episodes without things that are super interesting looking. Whereas in this, it's like you're never 5 minutes away from another scene that looks pretty good, actually. Right?
Yeah.
It's a smart use of budget. Like, they make what they need to look good, and otherwise, it's, like, fine. And, and like you said, like, looking at the pretty backgrounds and, like, the cel-shaded artwork and whatnot, it just looks good standing still for enough time to keep your attention and whatnot while you're focused with the writing or whatever.
And other parts of it that I love. I mean, the show. This show is still funny.
Yeah.
At least, probably the first half of the show is definitely more comedic leaning. Mm-hmm. It's probably like a mix of comedy, action. The drama doesn't really start coming in probably till about 12 episodes, maybe 11, which is kind of, I think what, I don't want to say filters, but it's kind of the phrase for anime. It definitely...
I mean, yeah, we have seen it ourselves in our friend circles where it's like, to quote a certain someone, like, when does it get good,
Yeah.
And I don't agree with that, but I will definitely say, I think the earlier stretch, I wouldn't say even up to 12 episodes, I think, like, the first 2 or 3, maybe, just aren't. There's just, like, every once in a while sprinkled in an episodic episode where I don't think the plot or the dilemma is that interesting.
Yeah.
But, like, most of them are. Like, most of them are pretty good. Like, even really early on, like, you've got, I think episode 5, maybe, is the one with, the drunk guy who makes guns. Like, Frank, what's his name?
That's episode 3.
That's episode 3. Yeah, see, okay, that's really early. Even.
That is, that's like, one of my favorite episodes, too.
Yeah, and that's one of the best episodes, I would say. So, like, you frequently have those episodic ones that are just really good. It's just every once in a while there's ones that don't hit super well. Like, I don't, kind of any of the ones where it's like he's fighting a giant guy are always really weird.
Because they're just freaks. They're just freaks.
Well, they're just super weird, and it's like, they don't mix-match the comedic and the dramatic elements well enough, because it's like, wait, so is this giant guy gonna, like, actually crush this woman to death? Or, like... But then the tone is like, oh, no! It's like, okay.
It's interesting. And I could think of... Yeah, probably... I don't know, though. When I think of episodes, there aren't any episodes where I think I all thoroughly enjoyed them, but that's probably just because Vash, like, even if the plot isn't good, Vash is still doing something funny. Or just being entertaining. Like, it's like, oh, this plot isn't interesting, but Vash is just being a goofball. Or doing, he did something really cool there,
Right, yeah.
Because he's such a good character. It's insane.
He's really sick. For someone like me, I am a really big stickler for details, and my suspension of disbelief is very easy to break at times.
Yeah.
And part of the first half of the show that, like, frustrates me a little bit is just when the scenarios get just, like, slightly too unrealistic, or, like, I'm like, I can't believe he actually makes it out of that, instead of having to make, like, you have to kill that guy. But what we learned later on recontextualizes it in a way that I was like, oh, that's why he can do all of that. This is perfect. This makes perfect sense, right?
Yeah, he's not just a normal person.
Yeah, he's not just a normal guy. And I think you kind of pick up on that as you're going through. You're like, wow, he recovers very fast. Like, what's going on here, right?
Yeah, inhuman reaction speed, just like speed in general.
Yeah, and like you see he can calculate things. Like, he very frequently shoots specific, perfect things to cause chain reactions to do exactly what he wants. And you're like, he's working on another level here.
Yeah, there's elements. I've seen people get frustrated over the why doesn't he kill, or why does he have to do things like this? But the way the writers make the situations creative where he doesn't have to do that and it still feels satisfying, I love. Like when he just, shoots a chandelier, it falls on someone, they like shoot someone else. That kind of shit is just really funny.
I mean, how many times in the show does he shoot the gun out of someone's hand, right?
Yeah, and even in, that giant guy episode, which I think is episode... I wrote my notes here. I don't remember which one it was.
It's like 6 or 7-ish?
It's episode 5. The giant dude with, like, the rocket fist and his old guys riding on him. Even though that episode's plot isn't super great, when he finally pulls out his gun and uses it for the first time, you're like, oh, shit.
Right, yeah.
And even that's when, Meryl's like, oh, this is Vash the Stampede. Okay.
Yeah.
Which, that one, speaking of which, I love Meryl and Millie with all my heart and soul.
Yeah, for sure. I was going to say real quick, that episode with the giant and the one with, like, the forest mansion type thing.
Oh, yeah,
fighting over the land deeds.
Yeah.
Yeah. That episode was good, but the villains in it, like the giant people, because it was like a family, they were just way too weird. And, like, I dislike that in characterizing the giants, they always have to make them, like, not, like, intentionally really not smart. Like, they make them, like, I don't know what's going on here. It's like,
it's just kind of that old, like, anime humor sometimes. It's, like, very shoehorned, I guess. I don't know if shoehorned's the right word, but it's just, they look like this, they're going to act like this, probably. So.
Right, yeah. Tropey or whatnot.
Tropey, yeah. That's probably the word.
Yeah. So, like, those bits definitely take it out, because I'm like, they're not reasoning with a real human being. They're reasoning with a guy who doesn't know what's happening, right? Like
a creature.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so... Those episodes are so weird because you're like, these villains, like, aren't that interesting, but then the actual, like, core dilemma of the land and, like, the family is super interesting.
That part's really good.
Yeah. So it's just, even the episodes where the plot isn't strong, they still do something good.
Mm-hmm.
Because, sure. I don't think I could point to one episode where I'd say this is not a good episode, because I think every episode has at least something in it.
For sure, yeah.
And, I mean, I guess there's a recap episode, if you want to count that. But even that, there's, added, like, commentary from Meryl that kind of recontextualizes some things.
Right, sure. Yeah, there's a recap episode, and in the last episode, like, a quarter of it is kind of recap, and then some of it is, like, recap with new scenes that recontextualize and whatnot.
Yeah.
Do you want to give a brief summary now that we're really getting into it about, like, what the show is about and the characters and whatnot?
Yeah, and I think normally for a lot of shows we kind of go episode by episode, but I don't think we really need to do that.
Yeah, no, I would like to kind of go, like, chunks of the story. Like, I think the first half and the second half are pretty clear points.
Yeah, I mean, there's a very, very obvious turning point in this show.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the themes, I like, Trigun's really not too subtle with a lot of the themes either. It's easy to get.
For sure.
And I think that's why it resonates with a lot of people. It's the value of life, really, and what it means to kill someone. I think is kind of the main themes I got from the show, at least. Yeah,
for sure. It, and, a lot of it is, like, a trolley dilemma kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of episodes that are like, there's a bad guy with a gun, and he is going to either significantly harm people or kill them, and, you're thinking, well, you just have to kill him to get rid of it, but, like, even that amount of doing something bad is bad. Like, you might not see it as such, but to Vash and to others, it is, like, not a justifiable price to pay. And so it's all about finding his way to save everyone kind of thing.
Yeah, and Trigun, a lot of times you think, okay, this guy's, irredeemable. And then the show's like, no. Like, they have reasoning, and is killing them really doesn't solve the core problem.
Yeah.
It just kind of pushes it off. And, I mean, Trigun also, kind of the whole reason for Wolfwood, the GOAT, Nicholas D. Wolfwood.
Yeah.
Also a fantastic character. I think Gavin's favorite character.
That's pretty reasonable.
Is he's, a foil to Vash in a lot of ways.
Right.
Where it's he will kill to protect others because that's the kind of upbringing he's had, or he knows what will happen.
Right, yeah. He's been forced to in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But even then, by his own admission, he realizes he has kind of become lazy with it, and if he had just worked a little bit harder, he could find more ways to save more people.
Yeah. So it's
good stuff.
Vash and Wolfwood, pretty much any time they're on screen together, it's peak fiction, as the kids say.
Very true, very true.
They're such a good duo, and they play off each other so well. I don't know. It's hard to even kind of sum up every little interaction they've had, but it's
right, yeah.
Incredible.
Do you want to give a quick premise summary then? Or should I do it?
Yeah, I can, sure.
Okay.
I mean, so I'd say they're kind of 3 different arcs to the show, more or less, even though it is episodic.
Right.
But the episodes are way more removed, probably in the first, 10 episodes or so. Where it's kind of time skippy between the chunks.
Yeah, the first 10 episodes or so are, truly episodic, whereas, the last, half or so is, they're episodic, but, they flow into each other, and there's, ongoing narrative stakes between them.
Yeah, the first 10 or so is kind of getting a feeling for Vash and how he acts and, resolves situations.
Right, as well as the setting, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, usually desert settings aren't that interesting, but the world is, I don't know, I just really, I like the world, even though it's pretty barren. You really feel it in the way people live.
Mm-hmm.
And they draw it beautifully, so maybe that's part of it. It just looks cool.
It definitely helps.
Yeah, I mean, the first couple episodes, we meet Vash, who is introduced as the $60 billion double dollar man. Or
yeah.
Yeah, they run on double dollars there, which I don't know, it's kind of a cool currency name. I don't know why I like it so much.
Yeah, it's funny.
He's crazy guy. He'll kill you if you look at him wrong. That kind of typical misunderstanding type thing.
Just everywhere has a story about he showed up, and if you mess with him at all, he'll kill everyone in your family. He showed up and destroyed this whole town and left.
Yeah, the first and a lot of the early parts of it kind of revolve around Meryl Strife and Billy Thompson, the insurance gals, trying to track down Vash. The whole reasoning for them having to follow Vash is pretty funny. Yeah. It's just stop him from causing more damage, as an insurance company. It's
not only stop him, but also your insurance agents, and we need to make sure that these people are claiming it correctly. Go watch him so that you can testify to these claims, what really happened, and so we know who to pay or not.
Right, so
it's really funny.
They're trying to find Vash. They run into this disgusting boomerang guy in the first episode.
Oh God, yeah.
This is Vash. He's meets the description because for some reason people thought he was a giant or something. I don't know.
Yeah, or had a mohawk.
Had a mohawk.
Yeah.
Vash saves them, stops him. They go to another town. Vash is a bodyguard for a manor dude, a wealthy guy who owns the only water in the town.
Yep.
We go from there to the gunsmith episode, which they don't actually do too much in there. That one's just a really cool episode with Frank West. That
episode's really good.
Not Frank West, that's the Dead Rising guy. I don't remember.
Yeah, no, it's
Frank something. I forget his last name. That's cool because then he gets his gun fixed up, and that kind of shows. It's the first time the show's we can make real depth to these side characters.
Right. Yeah.
That makes them really cool. The next episode is that's the hostage situation with one of the weirdest intros when he's listening to music and dancing or whatever, if you recall that.
A little bit, yeah.
They hold up in a bar. He's got the rich the rich dude's daughter, and he's listening with his AirPods in. And he dances into the hostage situation or whatever.
God,
it's crazy. There's that. Then there's the giant dude episode after that, and then there's him being a bodyguard again for another lady. The power plant one. That one's really cool. I like that episode.
The power plant one's the first taste of what the series will become.
Something's not right about him.
Yeah, something where he fixes the power plant on his own, and they're that doesn't make any sense. What's going? You're something's afoot.
Yeah.
And also, the girl's deal is that she's seeking revenge on the guy who destroyed July.
July,
I forget. Yeah, is it just July?
It's just July. All the towns are named
July.
after, like, months or whatever.
Right, sure. But this was, like, what, 10 plus years ago, 15 years ago or something? And she's like, oh, and also there was this different guy that, like, you know, saved her a little bit and took her out of the danger and whatnot. And you see it's clearly Vash the Stampede, but he looks exactly the same as he does now.
Yeah.
Right? So you're like, okay, something is really up here.
Something not right. Then, yeah, they go on to, like, the Sand Streamer. Pretty cool designed vehicle there. I like that whole...
Is that the big two-parter one?
Yeah, with the little kid in there whose dad, like, built it or was an engineer on it. And then there's the the gang voiced by Joseph's voice actor, the main bad guy. His name I forget, but he turns out to be really cool.
Yeah, I forget his name, but he was one of the first, like, villains that's, like, not just a generic looter guy. Like, he is, but he has, like, a code of honor and whatnot.
Yeah.
And at the end, it ends up saving them in that he, like, has a duel with Vash, and he's like, whatever, you're good enough. We're gonna not do anything anymore.
Yeah, and I think that episode's kind of a good point towards Vash's not killing ideal. Because that dude, executes one of the engineers in cold blood, pretty much.
Yeah.
So, like, this guy's irredeemable. He's horrible. But then because he doesn't just kill him, and they have a duel where he, doesn't shoot to kill him, he's able to stop the Sand Streamer from going out of control when Vash can't. So it's kind of, killing people doesn't resolve all your issues.
Right.
And then, after that episode is when we get introduced to Wolfwood with his... sick-ass cross gun. That thing is so cool.
Dude, that's so cool. He carries around this giant cross that is, like, wrapped in, like, bandage kind of thing, paper kind of stuff. And it's just, like, a extendable giant gun, basically. But also, like...
has a bunch of pistols in it, with different
right, but it's also, like, an impromptu shield. Like, he blocks all kinds of bullets and shit with it all the time. Yeah,
they get really creative with how he can use it. It's really cool. And it's so heavy because it's full of mercy.
Yeah.
I love that. I don't know why. It's just a cool way to describe it.
It's a good line. It's a really good line.
Then there's, the quick draw tournament with Vash and Wolfwood, which is kind of silly, but also kind of not.
Yeah. It's that's the one where it looks like Wolfwood's going to actually kill Vash.
Yeah,
right?
like they seem to be taking it seriously, but then they're just, they end up saving somebody. People. Right.
Yeah. It's a good one. Really good one.
Yeah, and that's kind of the first where you start seeing that they, handle situations differently. Mm-hmm. Especially in the episode after with the kid from the rich family who's running away with, like, the girl he likes.
Oh, yeah.
And Wolfwood and Millie are like, okay, we're going to help him, but Vash is supposedly hired to kill him or bring him back.
Right.
And then you see, there's kind of the whole them getting mad at each other thing, but not really, because Vash was just acting pretty much.
Right, yeah.
But then, 12th episode that's kind of where this whole, I'd say the lighter-hearted part of the show ends. Right. This is where we see the first example of Vash not killing someone having direct consequences.
This is the first of the gung-ho guns, right?
Yeah, that's the episode's called Diablo, but I think his name is Monev the Gale. I'm pretty sure that's who it is. So
right. And he's like the weird kind of big purple guy with a giant Gatling gun.
Yeah, he looks like a mech, kind of.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, he's a huge Gatling gun, and he murders several people fighting Vash.
Yeah, he kills quite a few people while fighting Vash, and Vash still doesn't kill him during it. It's a big turning point because when he finally, like, defeats him and whatnot, he's, like, really tempted to kill him because he's, like, he just keeps screaming, people are dead, right? And it's a real fucking heartbreaker, no lie. Especially when he's pointing the gun in his head and, like, really considering whether or not to do it, and the guy is freaking out, losing his mind.
Begging for his life, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, is someone like that worth, giving mercy?
Right.
And eventually, he ultimately does. Yeah. He also whips out his cool-ass arm gun.
Yeah, arm gun.
The hidden contraption, the Mousecatool.
Yeah. It's, but the thing with the gung-ho guns is all of them, in this like force or whatever that seems like to be the main antagonist force that we don't know much about at this point. All of them, like, whenever they fail, they just get executed, basically, by the other members. So, like,
yeah.
So it really doesn't matter whether or not Vash spares them, to be honest.
Yeah, which, we find out later. Because, that's kind of the next turning point is, like, these are the antagonists, and you get to meet, they call him Legolo, but I don't actually know if his name is Regulo, or if it's, like, a translation thing or not.
It's a legato.
Legato, yeah.
It's a musical term.
Right. The L's and R's are always kind of weird in like how they decide to translate them or
Legato Blue Summers.
Right.
Yeah. That's where it's like, oh, something is quite weird.
Yeah.
Like there's more mystical stuff going on because Legato seemingly has the power to just control humans.
Yeah, I still don't know.
Speak telepathically.
It's never really explained how he got those powers or what
not
he
really.
is, but it's probably like a manga thing where it does.
Probably. And like, he's got, like, Vash's arm, among other things. Like, he is, like, he's probably partially not human, although he considers himself human.
Yeah, his introduction is crazy, by the way.
Yeah.
Vash just chilling in a town square, and the music just goes crazy, and he shows up and looks like he's about to kill a kid.
It's just randomly in the middle of an episode. Like, he just pulls up, and everything is different suddenly.
Yep. And then... kind of in that episode, I think we get introduced to all the gung-ho guns who have crazy names, by the way.
Right, yeah.
He's such goats, such as Gray the Nine Lives, Hopper the Gauntlet.
Yeah, they're so impossible to remember. They're all just so silly.
I had to write them all down, because otherwise I could not have recalled all of them.
Understandable.
Most of them, I would say, aren't, crazy interesting characters. They're kind of just, hey, we're part of a gang.
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of mostly just brainwashed people who have been taken in by this antagonist force, right?
Yeah. Some of them are definitely more interesting than the others. I mean, there's the dude who's got a saxophone gun. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Mid-Valley, the Horn Freak.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, we got a little interruption there, but...
yeah.
Well, we'll be talking. We're talking about Legato and the gung-ho guns.
Right, yeah.
Collection of freakazoids.
Indeed.
Yeah, so that episode happens. Kind of see all of them. And then there's Vash, the whole Augusta incident. That's a really good episode, too. I enjoyed that one a lot.
Agreed.
Where Vash goes into the town to scare everyone out of it, basically, because I think Legato's said, oh, I'm going to come to this town and destroy it if you don't do something.
Right, yeah.
And so then he fights Raide the Blade. That's that dude's name.
The sword guy.
The sword dude. He's pretty cool.
There's someone else in the start of the episode who dies, like, immediately. One of the other gung-ho guys. I forget what his name is.
E.G. Mine.
Yeah.
That also other
jobber.
weird dude.
Absolute jobber.
Did not stand a chance.
And he just gets killed by the sword guy.
Yeah, because he gets there, and Dominique and Monev are like dead. They got crucified on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy, by the way.
Yeah, actually.
And then he fights him, beats him, and then he fights the sword dude. Which is kind of funny that in this like Wild West, everyone has guns. This dude just has a sword.
Yeah, but it doesn't like also have a gun part on it.
I think so.
Yeah.
Obligatory sword characters.
Gun kata.
Gun kata. And then
yeah.
Oh, sorry, good.
I was gonna say that's where it gets serious because in the process of that, is it Legato unleashes his big nuke power off of the gun, basically in that fight with the sword guy.
Yeah, where his arm turns into I don't even know what to describe that as.
Angelic cannon, basically.
Yeah, the angel cannon.
Yeah.
And he shoots a hole in, or not a hole in the moon, but he makes a crater in the moon. Like
right, yeah. He's like pointing it at the sword guy for a minute, and the sword guy's like, "What is that? What is that?" And
losing his shit.
Yeah, and so Vash, like, in order to prevent as much destruction as possible, fires it up straight up, and it hits the moon and leaves a giant crater, but also pretty much destroys the surrounding area. Kills the. So it doesn't quite kill the sword guy, actually.
Yeah, no, it doesn't kill him. He's kind of fine, but then Wolfwood just rolls up and shoots him in the head and kills him.
Yeah, and that's where we first realized something is up with Wolfwood a little bit more so, because the sword guy's like, but you're one of us, kind of thing, right? And we're like, oh shit, he's working for them, kind of.
Yeah, and also when I think Legato was listing off the gung ho guns, there was someone named Chapel who they said was not present.
Right. Yeah.
Which I guess Wolfwood's like name in the gung ho guns isn't actually Chapel. So Chapel
is like his mentor guy, basically.
Yeah. So Chapel's a different character actually.
Yeah.
In the manga, the guy who you see in the anime, from what I was looking at, his name is actually like Chapel the Green or something. Who's a different guy who raised Wolfwood, but there's a different Chapel who's apparently like the leader of that whole church thing.
Right. Okay.
So that's kind of interesting. I don't know what's up with that, but yeah, when I was looking at the gung ho guns earlier, I was like, okay.
Right. Yeah.
So I got curious, but yeah, so something's up with him. He's part of the group for some reason,
basically.
And then the next episode, you finally get the Vash backstory that's kind of hinted at.
Right. Yeah.
Occasionally throughout other episodes with the mention of Rem, not ReZero Rem.
Not quite. Yeah, so
I really like that episode. It's such a cool episode.
Yeah, I will give a quick summary of it because it's like one of, if not the most important episode, basically.
Yeah.
And I did, in fact, rewatch the whole episode for this. So basically, what we've got going on long before the actual current time of the show is inside the spaceship. Basically, there are people who are trying to colonize other planets, and due to the Earth being, I don't think it's destroyed and I don't think it's uninhabitable, but the amount of resources they have
it's
is
dwindling.
not. Yeah, they've used too many of the resources, and people are now spreading out and trying to colonize other planets, basically, having realized it too late, basically. And so you've got on the ship, you've got Rem, this woman Rem, you've got Steve, you've got
Steve.
You've got Mary, I believe is the other girl. Ramon. God, I gotta remember the names.
Yeah, I don't actually recall the names.
The names are a little hard to remember, especially because they're like very simple names, right?
Yeah.
But basically, you've got a crew of like 5 or so people, pretty much, on this ship, and they're tasked with. They have a bunch of different ships, and they have a bunch of sleeping people, like cryo frozen inside the ships, basically. And their goal is to eventually find a planet themselves that is inhabitable and like favorable, basically. And then they will wake everyone up. It's Rowan. Sorry.
Oh, not Rohan.
No, not quite.
Rowan.
And once they find an inhabitable planet, they'll wake everybody up out of the freezer chambers and inhabit it and whatnot. So you've got 5 or so people doing that. There's also Joey, who's like kind of, it seems like the captain type thing. Not like the whole council. Like, it's implied there's another council, but that they're frozen, so he's basically making the decisions for right now.
Yeah.
And, they're on the ship also. There is 2 children, seemingly. This would be Vash and his basically brother, Knives. And they look like they're like 10, 12-ish at the current time. But we find out they are only, in fact, about a year old, and that they are not humans, decidedly.
I didn't even realize. I forgot that they were only a year old in that episode.
Yeah, they're only a year old. They grow super duper fast. And so they are not human. They are, I believe they refer to them as plants, right?
Yeah, I don't recall specifically like what type. Like, they're basically aliens. I don't remember what.
Yeah, they're
category, but
yeah, they're pretty much superhumans. And at one point, Knives refers to them as plants. He says, "You're a plant," right? They're basically not humans by all intents and purposes, and they are being raised basically by this crew, and there's a lot of tensions that come with that. A big chunk of it is like they are in fact like superhuman, like they possess super high IQ type of things. Like the computer work that all the staff does, they can do extremely quickly, and they can do much easier and whatnot. They can make calculations on the fly, and it's kind of implied that they have somewhat different understanding of emotional intelligence, right? Like Knives, specifically in the duo of them, they're both being basically raised by this girl, Rev Save Rem, or Rem Save Rem. And she's
crazy name.
I know, right? And she's like trying to implant morals in them, pretty much. And Vash responds to it all very well, but Knives doesn't really get it for the most part. Like, he gets some parts of it, but he doesn't like other parts of it, and he finds her logic to be contradictory at times.
He's more so like, okay, I'll go along with it because I like Vash, and this is what Vash wants to do. He has
very big camaraderie with Vash and his other like plants and whatnot, but he doesn't really necessarily identify with the people as much. And this is largely shown to be because Steve and some of the other humans like don't really see them as human. I mean, Steve like is outright discriminatory against them and calls them like monsters and that kind of thing, and like regularly pummels Vash around and whatnot. He's a real big scumbag. He's also like very flirtatious and like let's say straddling the line between sexual assault on this girl Mary.
It's like straddling the line.
Yeah. Not really straddling the line. He is just being that weird. But there's some weird lines in there. It's kind of implied that she's like a little bit cool with it. Like, she has a line when Knives goes into her room to discuss what he sets up, where she says, "Oh, those guys, but it's nice that there's two of them. It would be boring if it was just one." So it's like
it's kind of freak as well, yeah.
Right, but it's like implied that like despite this, they all get along well enough to where situations could be resolved, and it doesn't have to come to anything drastic. Unfortunately, it does.
Yep.
One of Rem's big things is she's just like a big nature lover, big life lover in general, and she's like, you know, we want to make a new place where it's just a nice big green planet and everybody can be happy and nobody has to kill each other or steal. And they're kind of at the point where they can do that technologically. They just have to find the right planet, pretty much. And at the time of like this episode, they have found a new planet, but it is not super optimal. It's like just a giant desert, basically, which is where the story takes place. And
indeed, I don't actually know the name of their planet. I forget.
No idea. I don't. It probably is, but I don't remember it at all. And so the big part where conflict starts to begin is Steve, you know, calling them monsters and like being like, "Oh, I can't believe you guys are eating with them" and whatnot. And it starts to make Vash feel very bad, especially when he gets pummeled by Steve, basically, for existing. And Knives, seeing that, takes issue with them, and it creates a us versus them mentality in him as well. And then Rem imparts a lesson on them where she's like, you know, nobody can take the life of another, nobody has the right to take the life of another, which Vash stands by very wholeheartedly, and which Knives doesn't really understand. There's a moment where there's a butterfly caught in a spider web, and the spider's going to kill it. And Vash is trying to untangle this butterfly so that it can live. But instead, Knives just pulls up and squishes the spider. And Vash is like, "Hey, that was messed up, dude." And he's like, "Why? That's basically what you wanted to do, was make sure the butterfly didn't die." He's like, "Yeah, but I wanted to save both of them." And he says, "Yeah, but if you save enough butterflies, you're going to kill the spiders eventually. Like, you're going to make them starve instead. That you're having the same effect, you're just not deciding on an outcome."
Yeah, the symbolism in that scene, I really like that. It's just a cool little moment, which is very obvious how these characters think and understand situations.
So that's indicative of his entire outlook, is he kills spiders to save butterflies. But in his eyes, what he kills is he dislikes the humans that ruin the purity of like the plants or other life on Earth, kind of thing. And so, becoming upset with the whole situation, becoming more upset with the people, especially Steve, he sets up this plot where Steve gets falsely accused of raping this girl Mary, and he gets Rowan and Mary to testify for it because Mary finds Steve kind of annoying, kind of flippant on her part, but you can understand why. He's obviously quite annoying, but you know, I don't know, doesn't matter. And then Rowan is in love with Mary, basically, And so he's like, if I can get Steve out of the picture, she's all mine, right? Even though she doesn't reciprocate his feelings really that much. And so he sets up this plot where they both falsely accuse him of rape, and they cryo freeze him forever, basically.
It's just crazy. That's
as punishment. Yeah,
worse than death, actually.
Well, it's like the idea was supposed to be that they freeze him until they find a new planet or whatever, and then he gets actually judged and put on trial, since they don't know all the information right now. But Rowan is like, haha, I messed with the freezer settings. He ain't coming back. It's like, oh my god, okay.
Yeah, fucking psychotic.
Yeah, and so Rowan has a psychotic break. He proposes to Mary on the spot now that Steve is gone, and she's like, no, what? No. And he just shoots her and kills her. He just completely loses his mind. And so Rem, Vash, and Knives go to see what's happening as he's just killing Mary. And Rem confronts him and tries to save him. And in the process, it's unsure whether or not he's going to shoot Rem, basically. He wants to shoot Knives because he realizes at this point that Knives set them all up, basically. But is not like coherent enough to really explain that to everyone. And so Rem goes to body block for Knives, and he's considering whether or not to shoot Rem. And at the moment, it looks like he's about to shoot her, and Joey pulls off the airlock, and he gets sucked out into space and dies. And Rem is... yeah. And Rem is upset about it because she's like, he wasn't actually going to shoot me. We could have resolved it. And Joey's like, with what I had, I feel like this was the only decision I could make. And so from there, Knives goes to Joey, and he's like, I think you made the right choice. That's what I would have done. He's like, you could be right, but if it was true that he wasn't going to shoot her, then I did make the wrong choice. And at which point Knives is like really solidifying his us versus them thing. And he says, that's illogical. That makes no sense whatsoever. Clearly, that's what was going to happen. And he shoots Joey and sets in motion this big thing to where he's going to crash all of the ships full of humans onto the planet and have them all die because he wants to be rid of them. He wants it to just be the plants who are like the superior life form to him, it seems. And in doing so, he kills Joey, sets them all on a course, and then he is going to have himself, Vash, and Rem escape. Keeping Rem alive, basically, because Vash likes Rem. But Rem instead puts them both in the escape pod and sacrifices herself to redirect the course of the escape pods and make it so that they crash land but don't all die, basically. And that with the seed pod, they can hopefully inhabit the planet and not all die out, kind of thing. At which point, once they're in the ship and once they're in the escape pod and the ship explodes, Rem dies, and some portion of the people are saved and land on the planet and live and whatnot. Vash basically realizes that Knife did all this intentionally and whatnot, and it becomes like the big sticking point between the two of them and whatnot, and their different thinking. It's it's so brutal. It's really messed up. And so now we realize the whole plot of the series is getting to the point where he confronts and stops Knives, right?
Yeah, and at that point, even though Knives is pretty much never going to really get mad at Vash, then they have a rift there because Vash lashes out.
Yeah,
right?
Because Knives is like, my goal is I'm going to kill all of the humans so it can just be us, like us correctly built life forms who are not like insane people. And Vash is like, whoa, no, you can't do that. And in order to stop him, Vash shoots him. And I like this scene a lot because Knives like can't comprehend that's what happened. He's like, because even to him that's a step too far. He would never shoot another plant. He would never shoot another correct life form.
Or his brother.
Or his brother, right? Yeah. Like Vash is really the only person he cares about, basically. And so it's like unfathomable to him. As well as I like it as a moment of like he's realizing what it's like to have these things done to him, and it freaks him out. Like he's like, oh my god, is this what's being shot as like, right? It's a really good moment. And so, he's just sitting there the whole time like, did you shoot me? Did you shoot me? Like
it makes me think of the, not directly, but the way you said that, the Always Sunny scene where Charlie's like talking to Santa Claus in the ball, like, did you fuck my mom?
Oh my god, yeah.
Did you fuck my fucking mom?
Nah. Oh, yeah, I would say those two are pretty tonally similar. Yeah.
Just the way you said it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Side tangent.
Yeah. So, and we see in the last episode they expand upon those scenes and show what they're doing in the next couple of years. in terms of like. Actually, I think that part in specific is from the last episode, and we see like they're questing together. We see Vash like thinking about killing Knives, but ultimately deciding not to, and whatnot.
Yeah, trying to Cain and Abel him.
Right. Yeah, he had a giant rock. There's also the bit that like it seems like they are the only two like plants that are like out and formed and whatnot, but like the other are the literal power plants being used as fuel for these like water supplies or for like these towns and whatnot.
Yeah,
and,
which we find like, oh, they're them inside of there. So
right, yeah, and so Knives takes issue with that. He's like, these lowly humans are using us as fuel, basically, when we are better than them, kind of thing. So it adds a little bit there for sure. I don't know what thoughts do you have on this backstory?
I loved it.
Yeah, I thought it was really good.
Yeah, a couple of the characters on the ship are maybe a little too like cartoonishly evil, but I can understand the way they show Knives and how he acts. He's very cold, and to a degree where it's like, okay, if you're a normal person, you're not going to trust this guy, this like kid who's 1 year old but looks like he's 10, and he just seems very cold, and because they already have issues trusting them, and he's not, very receptive or anything like that. Right, yeah.
But
it's makes
also,
sense to that degree.
Yeah, it's also like the implication really feels like that he only became that way due to the discrimination he faced first by Steve and possibly others, right? It feels like that only really buds when he sees Vash receiving this horrible treatment. And so
and there's very easily, a path where everything's fine with Rem and he's with Vash long enough that he kind of, even if he doesn't fully understand what Rem's telling him, he's like, okay, well, Vash wants to do this.
Right.
So I'll be nice to people.
He's certainly a product of the circumstance. Like he says he was even going to let Rem live just because Vash liked her. So there's definitely within him that possibility of thinking like not all of them are so bad, right?
Yeah.
But it's tough.
It's very satisfying because, Vash's backstory is like hinted multiple times in pretty much every episode up to that point. Right. And all the weird kind of off stuff that happens, and it just all kind of clicks there, and it makes sense.
This was definitely the episode that made the series really click for me in terms of like all of the earlier parts where like I was like, can he really line up a shot, or like and I'm like, oh, he's like quite literally superhuman in some way.
Yeah.
Like that. It really shouldn't matter. Like I really shouldn't be like, but the shot is like theoretically way too hard. But
it's improbable that he would have shot that at a perfect 30-degree angle.
Yeah, exactly. But it just makes me feel a little bit better where I'm like, there's contextual justification. He's not just the goodest guy.
Yeah, the goodest and the strongest.
Yeah, exactly. And doesn't afraid of anything. But yeah, and this is also like where we figure out like how long he's been alive. Like they've been on this planet for like 150 years or so, or like
and they just don't age past pretty much what they currently look like.
They're basically functionally immortal, and they regenerate very quickly. There's things that don't regenerate, but like his scars and whatnot he has on him,
which fucking sick, by the way.
Yeah, really cool looking, but very unfortunate.
Yeah.
I do also like. This is also where we learn what happened, like specifically what happened with July. Which was, he went there because he looked up in the database and saw from like the living like more ship type colony survivors where they're actually like in the ship and have the technology. He looks up in the database. Wait, there's someone on this planet who is related to Rem still, and so he goes to see them, only to find Knives there who has just killed him and said, "Look, now there's no longer anything linking you with Rem. Isn't that nice?" And of course. Vash does not take it so well and freaks out. Knife shoots him and sets off the thing in his arm, basically, and is like, you should shoot the planet and kill all of them, basically. That's what should happen right here. But instead, what Vash does is he shoots Knives instead. He points it at him. And a very good moment, because Knives is like, are you going to shoot me again? Is that really what you're going to do? Like, he's, like, mad now.
He pissed.
Yeah. I do like this as a progression because when it happens originally, he doesn't shoot him with a cannon, he just shoots him with a gun, and it's like he intentionally very much so shoots him and doesn't know how to act about it. And then when it comes to July, and he shoots him with the cannon and also destroys the town and whatnot, like 100 years ago or whatever, or no, it was like 10 or so years ago. Sorry.
Right.
It's again, he's intentionally shooting him with it, and he like wipes out his lower body, and that's why Knives hasn't done as much. That's why he has the gung ho guns. He's like made them for while he's healing, basically, or whatever. And so it's like he's again intentionally shooting at him, but now in August he has, rather than that, he is shooting at this guy. He's like realized like he can't get by just like causing violence on him, and that's not going to do it, right? Mm-hmm. I like that, even though he's like obviously not there to shoot this time, right? But,
yeah, it's more of just a thematic thing,
right? It's the same kind of deal. I very much like it. I don't know. There's a lot going on there for sure. It's very interesting.
Yeah, and I mean he knows the destructive power of it because he wiped out an entire town.
Right. Yeah.
So then you kind of find out you're like, oh, Vash like has killed people before.
Right, yeah.
Not intentionally, but he has, and it's kind of further cemented his psyche, where it's just like, I have to do good things to make up for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so from this point on, it's pretty much just like confronting the gung-ho guns in different scenarios up until the climax kind of moment.
Yeah, kind of. Although I do really like the whole him becoming Eric's with the living with that family and Wolfwood having to remotivate him, like remember your purpose. I really like that whole little arc too.
Right, yeah. I do like the moments where he is like, we haven't talked that much about Meryl and Millie.
Millie.
Yep.
Yeah, Millie.
But the two insurance ladies, they're major characters, and at this point they have become like intrinsic motivations for the characters. Like Meryl and Vash at this point have like, you can kind of feel the romance budding between the two, and once things start getting serious here, like they're very like, they find themselves outmatched a bit because we're fighting like basically literal superhumans at this point.
Yeah, and he's like, you need to leave me alone or you're gonna die.
Yeah, he's like pushing them away because he's like, you will die if you stick with me. Everyone I meet dies, kind of thing, right? Yeah. It's really hard to watch it sometimes, but I think for other fights with the gung-ho guns that are super notable, I think the two-parter one with the ship colony people and whatnot is a really interesting one.
With the Puppet Master and there's like 3 of them in that
there's
arc,
3.
Actually.
There's the Puppet Master. There's, I don't know, there's 2 more that are on the ship that are kind of just like big fight you guys. I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird. the 9 Lives guy is the one who's like immortal seemingly, and then there's the Gauntlet dude as well.
Right, yeah. I don't remember those 2 super well, but I remember the Puppet guy.
Yeah, I just remember that the 9 Lives dude, Wolfwood, kind of fights him and like has to spill acid or like ship juice on him to kill him.
God.
And he's like not even a human or a person. He's just like a robot or something.
Right, it's weird. The ship is interesting. I didn't rewatch the whole episode, but I recall it's kind of like a, they don't really want to become part of the regular society on the planet and whatnot, and they want to do things their own way kind of deal.
Yeah.
As well as go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's really interesting kind of juxtaposition what they do in that episode where Vash is the one who's actually welcomed and Wolfwood is the one who isn't, like, compared to most towns.
Right, yeah. Well, because all the people on the ship know him because he's visited and whatnot.
Right. It's just kind of interesting because Wolfwood's the one like, oh, well, I guess. I mean, if everyone hates me, I'll just stay out here.
Right, yeah. And, there's some emotional bits there in that one of the people there is a woman who knew Vash when she was a young girl, and he really implanted on her, basically. And, she talks about, like, wanting to marry him or whatever. But now that he comes back, like, she's, like, dating-ish this Brad guy who kind of seems like a jerk, but you can tell he's still a good guy kind of deal. He's just, like, a little jealous of how much she likes Vash, right?
Yeah.
But that episode really implants Vash as, like, you're really, like, this is a guy who feels like a mythological figure to these people, in a way.
Yeah, he's outside of time.
Right, yeah.
So it's hard for him to really have any human connections or relationships, because it's just it's kind of like the thing with elves in fiction, where they live to be 600, and it's like, well, you can date humans, but they're gonna die, and you're gonna be alone. Pretty much. Kind of thing.
It's also an an eventful episode in that it's a two-parter. There's 3 gung-ho guns, and they are more brutal than they are anywhere else, basically. They kill a lot of the people on the ship. It's really horrible. And even to the point where like it feels like they've solved everything, but they haven't caught the puppet master quite yet, and he tricks them with a puppet version of the girl and goes to shoot Vash, and Brad takes the shots for him and dies instead. That part hits really hard because you're like, you know, this Brad guy was like really rude and whatnot, but he was a really good dude at heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a tough moment, and it's also punctuated by, you know, Wolfwood finding the puppet master guy and being like, you fucking lunatic, and just blowing him up and killing him, right?
He just shoots a rocket at him.
Yeah. And that's another part where you can really feel how much him and Vash differ, and that he's like, he lets his emotions get to him to the point where he's like, I will just kill this person in anger, right? Like, you don't deserve to live. And it's hard to side against him in that moment. It's just such a feels bad moment, right?
Yeah, and there's another really impactful, you know, scene there with Wolfwood when they go to the next episode or so at the orphanage, with one of the kids turns out to be a gung-ho gun, the controlling the worms.
Right, yeah.
Zazie the Beast. He's an action. I don't know if he's a kid or just a really small, full-size human. I don't know.
He's probably just a kid.
Yeah,
like,
and
it's just a genetically modified kid.
Right, and it's kind of a similar parallel to the scene on the ship with Joey, where Vash is like, and Rem is like about to de-escalate the situation. And it seems like he might not do it, and then Wolfwood just shoots the kid in the head at like the last second.
Yeah.
And Vash kind of loses it.
Yeah, he's like, you could have saved him. He's like, this was the only choice I felt like I had, you know?
Yeah, and there's a really good argument there. Where Wolfwood's like, you're not realistic. Like, you can't save people by doing this. And they kind of...
And the thing is, what's possible for Vash isn't possible for everyone else. Like, Vash can regenerate from these wounds, and Vash can do these superhuman tricks. But, like, if it was just Wolfwood out there, what choice does he have?
Yeah, he can't take 5 bullets.
Right, yeah. And come back a week later for the next situation.
Yeah, he has to kill to protect and kill to survive. And Vash just kind of, like, doesn't understand that to some degree. Yep.
And then we get to... rather sad episode here soon. Basically, Vash and Wolfwood meeting up with what are not quite the final 2 gung-ho guns, but 2 at once, one being Chapel and one being this crazy sniper guy, which Vash has to track down, basically.
Crazy design, by the way.
Yeah, he is really cool design. I really love
yeah, he's anime only, I guess. So.
Oh, really? Yeah. I mean, that figures, like, this could easily, like, it's kind of just an excuse to get Vash out of the scene, right?
Right.
For Wolfwood to have his showdown with Chapel, his, like, mentor, basically, who raised him and whatnot and put him into the trade. And he has a showdown with him, and he wins, and he realizes, hey, I can just spare him. Like, this can happen, and it'll all be resolved. And Chapel seemingly sees the light, too, and he's like, oh my god, you're right, kind of thing. But just as Wolfwood's turning around walking away, Legato controls Chapel and has him shoot Wolfwood in the back and kill him in cold fucking blood. And it's just...
it's so tough, dude, because it's like, Wolfwood's like, okay, yeah, maybe this is possible. And then he immediately gets bit in the ass for it.
Right, yeah. And it's like, he was right, but there's just interference. Like, and, like, what can you do, right?
Yeah, and it's, I mean, you know, it's if he had killed him right there, he would have lived. So... yeah.
But, you know...
And Wolfwood's death scene is so good.
Yeah, and it's so sad because, you know, while this relationship between Meryl and Vash has been building, it's been kind of a slow burn thing, right? Meryl is pretty tsundere and like, oh, I don't really care about him, but I really want to see him again, right?
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Vash is pushing her away. Millie and Wolfwood have had this romance out of nowhere, all of a sudden realizing they have very similar values. She comes from a big family, and he's used to this orphanage where he takes care of a bunch of kids. So they both have this like idea of like starting a family and whatnot. And they get together, and she becomes pregnant, but he dies. So like just out of nowhere, right? And she's just absolutely inconsolable. It's so sad.
Yeah, her voice actress went fucking crazy, dude.
Yeah,
like it's hard to listen to.
Yeah, for sure. The voice acting in this show is just really good in general.
Yeah, his death scene where he's like, seemingly accepting of death, and then he remembers the people he's been with. He's like, but wait, I don't want to die. Like, I have stuff I need to do.
Oh, it hurts so bad.
And his death pose, and it's so fucking
dies
good.
In the church,
it's
like,
so
on his
good,
cross, right? Oh, it's so fucking sad. Yeah, it's really rough.
And also, by the way, metal as fuck when Vash finds Kane and he just stands up and just shoots himself in the head.
Yeah, he finds a sniper gun and the sniper guy just immediately kills himself. Which,
like, oh my
I mean,
God.
he knows with the gung-ho guns, as soon as you lose, the upper guys are just going to kill you anyways. Like, there's no point in being alive.
Yeah.
It's really fucked up, and it really gets to Vash. Like, he's like, I failed to save another life, right?
Yeah,
So,
it's just a crazy scene because it's like, okay, I won. Then he just stands up and kills himself, like frame 2.
Yeah, it's really tough. But I was gonna say the voice acting in the show in general is really good. I've watched a good chunk of it with the dub and the sub, mostly just with the sub. I do think the sub is a bit better, but it does have a pretty good dub.
I've never watched the dub, so I know Johnny Young Bosch does Vash though, right? So.
Right, and he does a good job. I feel like he kind of is like very. Have you ever watched JoJo dubbed?
I have not.
It reminds me of the performance of young Joseph, in the JoJo dub, where he does a really good job of the character in general, but just has a little bit of a hard time being not too goofy and like doesn't quite sell the serious things just barely enough compared to the JP dub. I feel the very same way about this. Like he has a very goofy voice, and sometimes the serious parts don't work as well as they do in the JP. But it's also got one of those where it's like, Meryl seems pretty fine, but Millie is. I mean, in the JP dub, she's like squeaky high pitched, but it doesn't work super well in the dub necessarily. Maybe, I don't know. At the same time, it does work pretty well. Like she just has like a very like stupid high pitched voice where she just sounds not very smart. I could see either ways if people hated it or loved it, but I would just say the JP dub is just a bit better for sure. Pretty much for all the more serious moments.
Seen any of the sub, but that's always been kind of my thing with anime dubbed is like I feel like dub works for non-serious moments, but whenever there's a serious moment, that's when I really feel it because I feel like I don't know if it's just like I guess phrasing, right? A lot of the times,
the dialogue tends to get very stilted in English dubs of serious moments, and that's definitely an issue with these older dubs in general. They do a really like when the dubbing scene was newer. Like, when this show would be dubbed, like, the 90s, right? They do a really good job with the not-serious moments, and they do a good job at localizing things. Like, they're not afraid to change whole sentences to make it sound more correct or make more sense to an English audience. But in the serious moments, that hurts it a bit more, but in the non-serious moments, it makes a lot of sense.
It's part of, like, a lot of Japanese, like, phrases and words don't necessarily translate.
Yeah, they have
directly to English, and so for serious moments, like it just doesn't work sometimes because it's like you can try and like substitute words, but it just doesn't. I don't know.
Yeah, Japanese is a very contextual language, so it's very hard to translate in ways, and also it's just like the verbs and the nouns very frequently are switched in where they are in the sentence. So sometimes you have animation that doesn't quite line up where you would want the lines to be.
Yeah.
So, like. The big one I always think of is whenever someone's like, and you killed them. It's always in English, like the noun is at the end where it's like, you killed these people kind of thing. And the emphasis is there. But in the Japanese, it's always like, da-da-da-da, kudos, right? And it ends with that part. And so sometimes they have like the imagery reflect that. And it makes a little bit less sense in the dubs. But
yeah, I can see that. That makes sense.
But yeah. It is interesting because my version of the rips has the subs hard-coded on there, so I'm seeing the JP dubs, or the JP subtitles in real time, the difference between that and what the characters actually say. So it you like notice it a lot more. But
yeah, right.
Yeah. So we get to this ending stretch, right?
Yeah, and then so Vash fights Mid Valley. He beats him, and then Mid-Valley also just kills himself.
Yeah. And he knows the deal. Oh, we didn't mention, actually, this is an important part to mention, with Chapel, because Chapel obviously didn't want to kill Wolfwood. He goes back to Legato and to Knives and whatnot, and he tries to kill Legato, because he's pissed about having to kill Wolfwood, obviously, right?
Yeah, and it says a lot.
It doesn't work, but it says a lot for him in that maybe he's not redeemable, but he's not a purely evil person, right?
Yeah, I think it's obvious he did raise Wolfwood, and he obviously cared about him. So
yeah,
which is cool for a bit. Like he didn't have much screen time at all, but for the first episode and a half he was in there, you get a feel for how that organization kind of works and the values they have.
Yeah. But yeah, so he fights Horn Guy and basically kills himself. And then he fights Legato. And Legato is pretty much the antithesis to Vash in that he is a conundrum that cannot be solved with Vash's way of thinking. He's just too powerful. Because he can just control any human, basically. Hypnotically. And, his whole goal is just to make Vash suffer, basically, because Knives is pissed at him. Almost childishly for just having hurt him with the gun and whatnot.
You shot me, now I'm going to ruin your whole life and unravel your ideology.
Yeah. I like with Knives that his thing is he opposes Vash ideologically, but you can tell where his ideals don't line up with his experience, and when he gets shot for the first time, he can't be consoled with how much pain it is, and there's this reckoning in his mind of basically this is what he's doing to other people, and he doesn't consciously realize it really, but you see within him he doesn't understand that dichotomy, and upon it happening to him he gets very mad, and so his next step of development is like a child. He's mad and he wants to lash out, right?
Yep.
It's very interesting, and it's a good way of painting subtly that he's in the wrong, even if maybe his logic can hold up at times, that he basically has stunted development.
Wolfwood dying is pretty much proof that Vash's ideology can fail.
Right, that too. Yeah, it's brutal. So with Legato, it basically comes down to Legato is going to kill Meryl and Millie with the townspeople, and there's nothing Vash can do to stop it. He would have to kill the townspeople to get them to stop moving and doing it, right? Or he has to kill Legato, and after a ton of deliberating and a heartbreaking scene, he shoots him in the fucking head, right? And just kills him. He's super ruined by it.
The whole next episode is him, once again, kind of lost his purpose.
Yeah.
Until Meryl kind of snaps him out of it.
Yep. Then he realizes he still has things to do, in that he has to go fight Knives, basically.
Yeah, the final showdown with Wolfwood's cool-ass cross on his back.
Yep, he goes with Wolfwood's cross. So the first half of that episode is, him getting there, and Knives is hey, how is it living as a human? And he's it was the best. And then you have those flashbacks where it gives more context to when they had just arrived on the planet, right? Which is all good moments. And then the next whole half of the episode is the fight between them. I really like the first half or so of it. It's just the best gunslinging kind of action scene we've had in the whole series.
Yeah, the animation's crazy there. It's so good.
Because we have these two superhuman people now fighting, and they do all these crazy shots. They do crazy duck and rolls, they do crazy shots at each other. At one point, Knives grabs his empty bullets, throws the cartridges above him, shoots them, and then they pop gunpowder and smoke everywhere, and he uses that as cover to approach Vash, right? And it's oh my god, they're capable of so much, right?
Yep.
And then it gets to the final showdown where it's, Knives is going to use his giant cannon arm against Vash and end it, pretty much. But Vash, what he does is he also uses the cannon, and they actually cancel out. And he's I didn't intend for them to be used like that, but you can, right?
Yeah, and the cool kind of symbolism there where Vash has the white light cannon and Knives has the black light cannon. It's kind of like a yin and yang type thing.
Yeah. And, it's also symbolic of you know, Knives uses violence just for violence sake kind of thing to accomplish his goals, but Vash uses his violence in a way to save, right? And to cause less harm, actually.
Yeah.
It's a cool bit. And Knives gets him into like a checkmate kind of scenario where he's going to fire both cannons at him, basically snatches the gun away from him. But in a really cool moment, Vash gets like Wolfwood's voice in his head, and he's like, "It's right next to you, idiot!" And he pulls out the giant cross from underneath the sand where it was hidden, and shoots Knives with it before he can fire the cannons. Like breaks both the cannons, and basically checkmates him from there.
It's sick.
It's a really good moment. So yeah, the ending is just he beats Knives, shoots him in each of his limbs so he can't fire or anything like that, and just carries him off into the sunset pretty much.
Yeah, once again, doesn't kill him when he could have. So.
Yep, easily could have. And, the implication being that, like, he's going to try and fix his ideology and they're going to get over it, right?
Mm.
I very much like it. It's very cool.
Yeah, it's a good ending. Like, it was that show could have been like a 50-50 on if they actually made a good ending for it or not, because of how it doesn't adapt like the full manga,
Right, yeah.
It's kind of its own thing. Like, it's like half its own thing and like half adaptation.
Right, yeah. Which, again, we don't have the context of the manga. It could be the manga blows us out of the water a little bit, right? But I think this is still very good for what it's worth.
Yeah, as its own like standalone thing.
Yeah, I think in general people are really uncharitable to adaptations of source material, and I think if your adaptation can capture even 70% of a masterpiece, it's worth existing to some degree.
Yeah, I agree.
There's certainly big issues with it, and there's issues of like people who, since they have a replacement, just won't go back, right? Like, you have people who watch Berserk and won't read Berserk. Like, it happens.
I know somebody.
Like and it's like, dude, what are you doing? But, like, arguably those people would never get introduced to it in the first place. You're glad, the way I think about it is I'm glad that they interact with it at all rather than none.
I agree,
right? And
yeah.
they get it to some degree.
So
although
getting to experience it in some value is better than not at all.
Right. Although it can make discussions of series really difficult, like the one I think of is Higurashi with people who have only watched the anime, and it's like the first anime is to some degree a bad adaptation. In fact, you could say it's a pretty bad adaptation. It's 50 episodes, but it doesn't cover all the content you want. It gets through the whole story, but like you're missing big chunks, you're missing big arcs, you're missing some of the logical connections. The part with Higurashi I always talk about as like proof that it kind of lollygags at times is they started the adaptation before all of the visual novels were finished.
Right, yeah.
And so one of the key plot points being whether or not Keiichi gives Mion this doll was not included in the first half because they didn't realize it would become a major plot point later.
It's so funny, like, even the people adapting the series don't know the answer, and so they're like,
right, yeah.
Well.
And so when they go to adapt season 2 of it to finish the story after it's all done, they have to go back and add a new filler arc where there's a new loop where this happens so that they can then justify it in the next one. And it's like, guys, this is uneconomical. Like, what are we doing here?
Economical.
Like, you hear economic storytelling, this is like the opposite of that, right?
I've never watched the Higurashi anime, and I don't plan to, so...
You're right, yeah. It's interesting. It does some things very well. The atmosphere feels really good, and people like rag on the faces for being like really hideous and whatnot at times, but like it's a horror series, right? Like when they're hideous and creepy, it usually fits the vibe.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a lot of scenes that just look really bad and aren't adapted that well because it's 50 fucking episodes and it's by Studio Dean, right? Not the most top-notch studio of all time.
Yeah. Are we going to have to do a Higurashi cast someday for the visual novel?
I think that one does have to happen. That one does probably have to happen at some point.
And it would be 8 episodes because I think every chapter has that much to talk about.
It would be impossible to cover in less than 4 hours, right? Like,
I think it would be longer than our Mishiko Tensei podcast.
You're probably right. They're the two series are roughly the same length. They're both about 1,000,000 words and some change. Like it's almost the exact same amount of words, pretty much.
Yeah.
Not including like redundancy and whatnot.
I think where it differs is that Higurashi is mystery, and so there's like a lot of speculation talk you can talk about, like.
Right, and it's such a hard series to adapt because it is a mystery. You have to include so many details, and that's a problem with it being really well written, is that all the details matter. So you can't just cut scenes.
Yeah, or like missing inner dialogue is really bad.
Right, yeah. Like I said, it's just a scene in chapter 2 where they win a toy at a thing and he gives the doll to this person. We can just cut that part. That's not that relevant. It's just like a fluff scene. And then oops, it actually accidentally defined all of chapter 5, right? Like
oopsies.
But yeah. So adaptations like this, I respect them for that. I even respect like bad or partial adaptations that do a good enough job. You can tell love was put into them. Like I think the Grisaya anime adaptation, while very clearly missing a lot and very different in the anime, I still have a lot of respect for it. I know Jordan does not agree with me on that.
I haven't watched it in a very long time, but I remembered liking it when I did watch it, but that was before I had read the novel. Yeah. So I
think it's good enough.
Also though, like how much how much of the novel do you have to adapt with like 70% of the visual novel is like these comedic like fuck around scenes? Yeah. I don't know. That's a weird one.
Well, and adapting visual novels with actual routes is always so hard because it's like there's a common route, but like you're supposed to see each of the endings for the girls, right?
Yeah.
And so like they adapt it, but they have to adapt it in a way that means it's not the final, like the arc doesn't end. Whereas like typically these are all different months where it's happening again. Like, well, this time in August this happens to Sachi. This time in August this happens to Amane, right?
Yeah.
And so they suddenly have to make a linear timeline where it all works, but also isn't conclusive enough to where like a character dies or something, right?
Right. It's so adaptations are always weird because at some level it's like, do you rate the adaptation based on the source material or do you rate it based on it being its own thing, you know?
Yeah.
But like I don't know, adaptations it could just not exist if you really think about it, but it's hard to get people to read novels. It's hard to get people to read even manga. Yeah. So I get why they exist.
It's crazy that it's so hard to get people to read manga when it's so fast.
It's infinitely faster than watching anime. And actually, I think reading manga is easier than watching anime. I'm not even kidding.
For sure, 100%. But it's just because you have to quote unquote read it. People hear read and they think novel and they think time sync, and so they don't do it. And they will be proud of not doing it. They're like, I only watch the anime. It's like, you're missing out on the source material of most very good things.
Yeah, I feel I have to use more brain power and, like, focus more when I watch anime than I do when I read manga.
Yeah.
And that might just be part of because I've read so much manga in my life that it's just, like, second nature.
Yeah, but I do like anime more in some ways in that, like, it's
you have to kind of
cohesive feel.
And there's a lot of things you have to kind of marinate on because they pace it out. So that you have to, like, when I read at my own pace, I read very fast, so I can fly through things very quickly.
And it can be hard to tell the tone or length of scenes. Like, one thing reading Berserk, it's kind of hard to be like, how long do I spend looking at this 2-page spread of the most beautifully painted castle I've ever seen?
Da Vinci.
That isn't relevant. Yeah.
Yeah, and
it's hard.
It's kind of, I like visual novels because it's a good in between because if they have voice acting, I will intentionally slow down to listen to the voice acting.
Right.
So it makes me kind of engage more with it.
Yeah, but at the same time, for me, it's like I get like halfway through the voice line and then I click next. I'm like, okay, I got the most of the voice line.
It does kind of depend on the series. Like, I don't think Higurashi I ever skipped.
No, yeah, Higurashi you can't. But in Grisaya, I mean, especially because I'm rereading it, right? I'm like, a lot of the voice work I'm not listening to unless it's an important scene.
Yeah.
But in Higurashi, I mean, that's a series where the voice acting is so incredible that like skipping it is a crime, right?
Yeah,
Like,
who wouldn't listen to the voice acting?
yeah, you would have to be really dumb.
You have to be pretty stupid. But tangent aside, Trigun,
Yeah.
fucking good, man. I don't know.
It's a way more straightforward thing to adapt a manga like this compared to a visual novel, right? They weren't going through the same gargantuan hurdles, but it's still a matter of like you have X episodes and it covers a lot of material, right? Like,
yeah, I guess I don't know, what end score did you give this? Like an 8, right, or something?
I give this an 8. I think it's a pretty strong 8. For me, it's kind of a combination of like some of the random episodic episodes I'm not a huge fan of, but most of them are still very good.
Mm-hmm.
Combined with, I like the whole series conceit and I like the narrative and the themes and whatnot. It just doesn't quite hit on that level of favorites for me.
Yeah.
Like, you know, some of it, it's not like the first series to be like, killing people is bad and you should be a pacifist, right? But it does do a very good job and puts a unique spin on it, but not so unique that I'm like, this is unlike anything I've ever read or watched, right? But I still think it is something I very much like a lot. Like, a strong 8 is a really good score, right? Like, that's something I'm like, I wish I could have more.
Yeah. For me, I think it being, you know, a 10 one of my favorites is because I watched it at a very formative period of my life for anime.
Right. Which, you know, who knows? If I had actually finished it in like 2014 or whatever, I very well could be in the same boat.
Because I was kind of in the same vein of like, I'm just watching, you know, shonen. I'm watching whatever my friend says is good. And I stumbled, I think I watched this on Funimation originally. It used to be on Funimation.
When that was a website?
Yep. And it was free to watch anime, which was sick.
Yep. It was really cool.
Yeah, and I watched this, and this was like the first one that I'm like, wow, this anime shit like gets serious, and I really like this.
Right.
You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
I was like, this is like, I mean, for a 14-year-old, like, this shit is fucking deep, man, you know?
Right, yeah. And to some degree, it really is, right?
And like rewatching now, you know, I still have all that nostalgia I love, and the art style still holds up incredibly well.
Yeah.
Music still holds up incredibly well. All the voice acting is still really good.
Yeah, it's got that. Once you become experienced in a medium, or just really analyzing media in general, nowadays, especially so, I notice voice acting is so much more than I used to, and people will be like, "And the dubs and the subs are basically the same. You can't even tell the differences in voice acting, anyways." But once you've been watching anime for a decade, right? Like, you get to know the voice actors. You get to know what a good performance versus a filling it in performance sounds like, right?
Yeah.
Like, I can imagine in my head the voice actors for Gon and Killua and how their screams imbue the feelings they feel at the moment, like in the Chimera Antark, Gon screaming at Pito, and you can feel all the visceral emotions within it. It's not just an anime scream, right? Like, and there are series where it is just an anime scream, but like Hunter x Hunter, you can feel like the depth of the performance. Like, it's a real actor doing it, right?
Yeah, and when you get to the point where you can, like, if I hear someone talk for like one line and I can recognize the voice actor in a language I don't even understand, it's like, damn.
Right, yeah.
And I'm like, oh, they're good, so this will be good, cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. So this series definitely nails it on that. I meant to mention this earlier in the beginning when I said the sound design's good. The opening and ending, man.
The ending is crazy. It's a little funky.
They're both so good.
I really like it. I love how the opening also, it kind of like, it plays into the episodic feel a lot too. Because it'll like, you know, do the intro and there's like the little insert showing like some scenes from the episode.
Right, yep.
That you're about to see. And it's like, oh shit, what's going to happen, you know? I don't know.
Yeah, it's also just got a good rhythm for the kind of like, you know, towards the end where it's got like the panning shots of like, here's a guy here kind of thing. It's like, and it's like, those are new episodes. It's a new moment.
Yeah.
Like, here's what we've got now.
The shot of Vash running across the hallway with the sandwich in his mouth never leaves my head. Yeah. It's just always in my head. And him walking with like the cloak kind of like billowing and like his sunglasses covering his eyes.
I always think of the one where he's got the three moons behind him, and he's just like kind of posing in the night, right?
Yeah, that's my wallpaper on I think on like hard. Chrome or something.
Right, sure. It goes extremely hard. And yeah, the ending theme is really good too.
Let me see what else. And then I was just kind of an overall on how our scores, I guess, for Trigun.
Right.
And it, I gave it a 10, of which I think I've given 6 or 7 series a 10. I don't consider if I give multiple seasons a 10 to be like separate shows, really.
Right, sure.
Some people could, I guess, because you could say, well, just because one season's a 10 doesn't mean the other is. But usually for me, 10s are more of like conceptually the series like is perfect to me.
I don't think there's anything I would give a 10 where I wasn't like the whole thing's a 10.
Yeah, because other seasons like play into it being a 10. I think if it's like, well, season 1's a 10, but season 2 is like a 7. That just doesn't really make sense to me.
I think it could theoretically happen, especially like in a disjointed series like JoJo, maybe.
Yeah, but, and I guess I do say that, but then again, I think I gave Snafu season 1 and 2 a 10, and I gave season 3 like a 9 or something. So
yeah, and I think that's fair. I gave it a very strong 8. I think my reasoning basically being I think it is a very good series, and it has a lot going for it. It's definitely above par in terms of the animation, the sound design, and the voice acting especially. But like some of the random episodic episodes just don't work that well for me. I think the vast majority of them are very good, but there were just 1 or 2 or 3 that were like, I didn't really like it. I didn't get super invested into it, or it took away from it a little bit. And the core narrative and the themes, while I think done very well and are interesting, it's not the first time I've ever seen, killing people is bad and you should be a pacifist, or like, what's the worth of a life kind of thing. And I wouldn't say necessarily I've seen it done better wholly in other places, but I've seen it mixed with other things in a way that I appreciated it more than in this series. Not to say that this series didn't do it very well, but
yeah, and I guess to some degree you have to think of when it released as well, because there's probably not as many things that tackled that theme back when it released, but
in the medium at least. But
in the medium is what I mean.
Everything ever has been done in novels before.
Yeah,
like they got isekai in novels for hundreds of years back. So
is the Bible an isekai? But anyway, the reason for me at least is I at least said that I watched this in a very like formative period of my life for anime, and it was kind of the first show where I was like, this is insane to me. Like,
yeah, and that very well could have been me if I had actually went and finished it 10 years ago when I started it, right? Mm-hmm. But it just kind of worked out like that.
It's kind of a similar vein to School Rumble. I watch these very close together.
Yeah. Or
it's like this, like it has a lot more like meaning and character to it than other stuff I've watched.
Yeah. We also talked about, some of what we meant specifically by the sound work, like the OPs and EDs being incredible pieces of sound design, right?
Yeah.
Really good stuff. We were talking about each of the iconic shots, right? Like, I always think of the one where he's posing with the 3 moons behind him in the night sky and whatnot.
I think of where he's running across the windows being shot at with the sandwich in his mouth, because that's just like, that's fast.
It's such a characterizing scene, right? Yeah, and the OP and EDs just absolutely slap as well. Like, they're just banger songs.
Yeah.
Truly some incredible stuff.
I don't know, like, because I think the opening is credited to, like, I don't even actually know if it's a person or if it's just, like, a song. Because I'm guessing whoever made the soundtrack made that opening, and it's just kind of for the show. Because it's very similar to a lot of songs also in the show.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, let me go double check.
And also in terms of sound design, we talked about the voice acting a good bit, right?
Oh, yeah, what am I saying? Of course, it's for the show. The song's literally called Humanoid Typhoon. So.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that'll do it.
Sorry. Anyway.
Yeah, but we were talking about, I don't remember how we quite got on the tangent, but the voice acting in the show is just really good. the screams and whatnot of Vash very frequently. You can feel the raw emotion in what he's saying and how he feels, right? And people talk about it. They say, "Oh, with the JP dubs versus dub, it doesn't matter that much. You can't even tell the difference in the voice acting." When you've been watching and critically analyzing stuff for a decade, like, you get a feel for it and you understand it, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just this big. You can tell the subtle nuances in how the characters speak and how they are when they're filling it in or not. And in a series like this, it does it really well. My example I think of now, because I've been obsessed with Hunter x Hunter lately, is Hunter x Hunter. In that, like, Gon and Killua in that show have amazing voice acting. It's so good. In the Chimera Ant arc specifically, like when Gon is upset at Pito, his screams, his rage, the way he feels is very nuanced and not just a "I'm mad" scream. You feel like him grappling with his insides about how he feels, right? And that comes through in the voice acting, because these are real actors voicing these characters, and it's a very prestigious industry over there. The same with Killua. My favorite thing about Killua's voice acting is he, part of his self-image is that he's a really cool guy, right? He's like, I'm the coolest. Like, nobody can step it up to me, right?
He says that a lot. I'm the coolest, yeah.
I'm the coolest.
It's like Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah. But it's like, you can hear it in his voice acting because he puts on a fake, deep, cool guy part to his voice, right? Like, he's like, like, kind of thing. You know what I mean? It's like a little grungy. And you can feel it's him putting on that, like, trying to sound older and cooler than he really is. And when it gets to the really emotional moments, you see that part break out, and he goes back to this high-pitched tone more so. And it's such good voice work. And you see bits and pieces of how amazing the voice work is in this series as well. A lot of the characters are done very well. I think Knives, I think Vash, I think Wolfwood their voice actors are all just killing it in the JP dub.
Yeah, I think both Meryl and Millie too, honestly.
Yep, those two are also very good.
Because Millie is, like, really kind of a strange character, because she's like comedic relief, but also has some of the most emotional moments of any other character. Maybe it's just that dichotomy, right? I don't know.
Yep. Her serious moments get very good, and it really comes through in her voice acting. Like, it's very easy to think of her as like a gimmick character, but once you get deep into it, it's like it's like, oh man, really? It's like she's her own person, you can tell.
Yeah, and she carries around the big fucking net gun, which is pretty cool looking.
It's sick. It's very cool. What other... I think we've covered pretty much everything that got cut, roughly.
Yeah.
Little bits and pieces. We also talked about how in the OP, it kind of adds to, like, the episodic feel. You were talking about how there's, like, flashes of the episode to come in parts of the middle of it in the opening song, right?
Yeah, there's a break point in the middle where it'll show, like, 2 or 3, like, shots of whatever happens in the episode.
Yeah, and
it very much feels like this, like, aired on TV type vibe,
right?
Which
Yeah,
I like.
It's very cool. I also have a big appreciation for openings that tie into the feel of the show, like, not just, like, tonally, like, this is a sad show, so the opening is a piano and a violin, but, like, in this one, the rhythm ties into it, where it's got, like, the da-da-da-da-da, and you feel these distinct moments, and it's like, these are flashes of a distinct episode. This is the new thing that we're worrying about. And it just works really well. I really love that part of it.
And like I said, the opening it sounds like a song that could have been in any episode as, like, a backing soundtrack to, like, a gunfight or a chase scene.
Yep, for sure.
And so it vibes really well with the whole aesthetic.
Yeah, it's really.
Where it's not just like, here's our anime. By the way, here's Yori Nomizu singing the opening.
Right. Yeah.
It's like it's a banger song, but, like, does it really, like, how much does it really fit?
Yep. It's not that many anime you can say, like, the song really ties in thematically to the series, but I think this is one that hits that a good bit. I wouldn't say it's, like, the most perfect opening for it I could ever think of, but it's so iconic and amazing. I think almost the ending is a better fit for the series.
It's got that kind of, like, goofy but also serious undertone.
Yeah, it's just got enough of the twinge of, like, melancholy to it, to where it's like, it really feels like it reflects the themes of the show.
Mm-hmm. And I think maybe, both the opening and ending are kind of, it's similar. The opening's like the action portion of the show, and the ending's more of, like, the reflective part of the show,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
There's just some shows I can't think of them ever having a different like opening or ending.
Yeah.
Like
pretty much.
Ashita no Joe.
Oh man.
I don't know if you could. I don't know if you could cook up a better opening or ending. So.
I think Midnight Blues.
Yeah.
In particular, it's like, I mean, the first opening is also really good at it, but it's a little bit more like, it doesn't necessarily show all of the tone. Like, you get a feel for the deeper part of it in how, like, languid the vocals are and how, like, stretched out the verses are, like, you know. But, like, Midnight Blues is really the core heart and soul of the series. And, like, it all kind of comes together there.
Yeah. That opening is very funny because to people who watch Joe, like, really, this is your favorite opening ever? It's like, yeah, you have to be there, man. You have to be there.
You don't get it, man. You don't get it.
Joe Cast will happen someday. It'll happen.
Oh, it'll be a masterpiece when it does.
We'll get Gavin on in here.
Yeah. For sure. I also, for other series, I think the Legend of Galactic Heroes first ending is like a big iconic one. You probably don't know it, Justin, but you've probably heard it before. It's a very iconic song, and people use it in a lot of videos and whatnot because it just hits this perfect tone of like, it's like kind of like a waltz piece, but it's like happy and sad and just this amalgam of emotions and very stylish. It's a very good piece of music.
I'll have to watch anime at some point. There's probably like a 0% chance I don't like it given the shows I like, but
it is tied with Joe as my favorite series of all time. It is just one of the best things ever.
It's the best.
It's amazing. I like it.
Kicking his feet under the desk right now.
I'm rewatching it.
I told you would do that in the fucking podcast by accident. I was right.
That wasn't by accident. That was intentional.
Oh, sure, man. Whatever.
You said kicking your feet. You think I'm not going to go hee?
No, but you never mind. Never mind.
I get it.
I think we about covered everything I really have to say about it.
Yeah, do we have any other lingering thoughts, any other topics on this show? I'm trying to think of...
No, it's I feel like the show gets as much recognition as it needs, and it doesn't get too much focus, which, I mean, it's, no one will say it, but it is nice when you have favorite animes that are kind of niche, because then you can be like,
But it's not real niche.
Yeah, it's right? In that like nice middle spot where it's like people have probably watched it, but like a lot of people who just watch like anime also probably haven't watched it.
Like this is popularity number 258 on my anime list, right? Like this is a popular show, but I agree, it's like right in that middle to where it's like mostly people who just care about the medium have watched it despite it being very popular or were around at that time or whatever kind of thing.
Yeah, and if you say, Trigun's my favorite show, no one's gonna say like, oh, that show sucks. They're just like, okay, that's cool.
12 and they haven't watched it yet.
Yeah.
No. It is nice to have a series that is niche enough to where you don't have to have like the shonen power scalers on it, right? Where they're like, oh man, Nicholas Wolfwood really jobbed in that episode. I mean, I really thought like. Or whatever.
Nicholas D. Fraudwood.
Yeah, absolute fraud.
Well, he is a D, so One Piece, eat your heart out.
Whoa. The Will of D.
There was a specific panel in the One Piece manga where Sanji is holding someone in bandages, and it looks exactly like Wolfwood's cross gun.
That's so funny.
It cracked me up. I don't know why. I was like, that's the gun, man.
It's him. Yeah, but it's nice to have a series that's popular. Not so popular that like some annoying people are on it or whatever, but popular enough to where you have people engaging with it consistently.
Yeah, you know what another show I feel like is that way is Gintama.
Yeah.
Even though Gintama's rated like top 10 for like every season in Mel, it's like nobody talks about it somehow. I don't know how. It's weird.
I mean... That's true, but also like in Mal, it's like, you go by their top rated list. It's like, let me go by score. Where is it ranked on here? Legend of Galactic Heroes number 13. It was 2 for a long time, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, even despite that, not that many people talk about the show. Like, people talk about the show existing, but not that many people chose to watch it still.
Yeah, I didn't actually realize it was that highly rated on here.
It was higher rated for a long time, and like on a lot of aggregate sites, it had a history of being like top 3 or whatever ranked for a very long time on a lot of different sites. Mm-hmm. But it converted somewhat into fame, but not as much as you would expect, right? Like, it's no FMA Brotherhood or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a show where people probably can't sit through it most of the time.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's very dialogue driven, even though it has a lot of exciting stuff. But
it's also very long. So
very long too. 110 episodes. It's right at that point where people are like, "Oh wow, I don't know."
Yeah.
But yeah, it's and that was part of the reason I made some content on it, right? Because I feel sad that there's not that many people talking about the series, despite it having so much to discuss. It's such a nuanced series, and so I made my funny little video, and people very much liked it. I was very happy about that.
My funny little video for the funny little people.
Yeah. I was, I remember in class, I wrote that video partially in this, class that was on a similar topic. It was about, what do you call it? Basically the ways that geography influences, political structures and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And, and, you know, of course, that's in theme with the video as part of the inspiration for it. And I was in class writing that because I was done with my assignment or whatever. And my professor walked up behind me and saw me writing it. And he was like, hey, this isn't an assignment, right? And I was like, no, it's something else I'm writing. He's just like, oh, like for fun? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, I wish we all had that much drive and free time or whatever. And I was like, yeah, fair enough.
You don't know I'm a huge fucking loser.
Yeah. Yeah.
But let me tell you, if I ever had the motivation, I could make more than a handful of videos on School Rumble.
Yeah.
There's so much. I feel like there's so much to talk about in that series that, I mean,
for sure,
nobody talks about that series. So
there's so many, like, we talked about it a little bit earlier with like our Bad Shows podcast, but I really do enjoy trying to find the depth and nuance in series that are even just bad, right? Yeah. Like, engaging with something on its own terms is rewarding in its own ways. And so many people get caught up in this feeling of, like, being better than the work. Like, they feel like they're smarter than the author or whatever. And so they just completely disregard everything it has to say. Like, even if the series is bad and you can tell why it's bad, you should make the critical arguments to yourself. And
let me be clear, though. This doesn't apply for gamers, so... Sorry, continue.
Yeah. But more often than not, it's really the very rare stinkers like gamers where it's like there's no substance to pull from it, right? Like it's super duper rare. Even Sword Art Online, which has been clowned on for 100 million years, and I think is a really bad show too, of course, like has depth and things to think about in it.
Yeah,
like there's interesting concepts.
Elfen Lied did.
Yeah, even Elfen Lied has a good plot line or two, right?
There's a reason I gave the show a 4 and not a 1, so...
Right, exactly. But people are so whimsical. They're just like, anything that's bad is all kind of in the same area, and I don't have to think about it, compared to, you know, engaging more critically with things they actually like.
Yeah.
I just wish people would apply a little bit more of it to the bottom half of their scores. Right?
Yeah, that's why I really enjoy, you know, I guess I could say Mal, because rating something a 4 or a 3 means a lot, and it's hard for me to decide. It's like those are two very different scores, even though they're 1 point difference.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like a world of point difference between a 5 and a 6 and a 6 and a 7.
Oh yeah.
But people, just don't really see the nuance in the scores sometimes.
For sure.
It's like if it's below a 5, they're all horrible. There's nothing to get from them. If they're like a 7 or higher, it's peak, you know, whatever.
Yeah. But you know, people get so mad at people for doing stuff like that.
We could have a whole podcast on anime scoring, to be honest.
Absolutely.
There's so much to talk about with it, and it's interesting.
One of the first videos on my channel is that like an overview of my anime list page or whatever, and it's basically that. It's basically a podcast about what I think about scoring and scoring roughly every show I've watched at the time. But Yeah, I don't know. People get so mad at newer people to anime for scoring so harshly too, and it's like you have to give them time to like figure this out for themselves, you know, right? Like you can't just be like, "Oh yeah, well you're wrong and you're dumb and I hate you." It's like
it takes a while once you get your like mean score to like a 6 or like a low 7 or like a mediocre 6 area. Then you've kind of started to figure it out, I feel like.
Yeah. It really depends on the person, but like I think when you hit that like 100-ish anime mark, I think you start engaging with it a little bit differently. I've seen people who have watched way less, who have watched like 30 shows or whatever, who can engage very deeply, and I've seen people who watch 3,000 shows who don't engage with it in any meaningful way, right? But like those experience marks mean a lot, and it can be a point of like, you know, really getting used to what you're watching. And there's a lot of series where it's like you can tell how unique or something it is through context, whereas otherwise you might think it's really unique, and it could be that it's been really ragging on a lot of stuff from before and that it's been done better, or it's been done worse and it's new.
As much as I hate Cole for making me watch terrible shows for his own entertainment, it makes you appreciate the better shows more, and it makes you like it gives you a better ability to find the good and bad shows.
Indeed, you've got the yin and the yang, and you know, just like.
And let me be clear though, that doesn't apply for gamers.
Oh, yeah, that one. That one's kind of like a moral failing on my part. Like that was unethical by any sense of the word.
It wasn't even fun. It was just miserable.
Dude, that podcast is just. I used to remember the like real life sadness in the way you described your experience. Like I actually felt bad.
Worthless episode.
Worthless episode.
Which I don't think I could ever say about any other show, that an episode was worthless.
It's so incredible.
Even Darling in the Frog, which has a 1 on my list, I don't think there's a worthless episode.
Oh, man. Incredible stuff. You know, it's to tie it all back up, you know, just like in Trigun, you know, even the worst person doesn't deserve to die and is redeemable in some ways, right?
Wow,
even
incredible.
The worst media,
incredible.
Man. Even the worst media, there's that little glimmer of light, except for gamers.
Except you're gamers. If you're Wolfwood, you shoot that kid in the head, and his name is Gamers.
And then Vash is like, hey, you... okay, whatever.
He gave up on that one instantly.
Yeah. Like, even Vash shot Legato Blue Summers, right? Like...
All right, that's good. Cut it on that one.
Cut.
We're not getting better than that.
All right.
In short,
you
should watch Trigun. It's good.
Very good show. Very good show. Thanks for sticking around if you did, and we will see you in the future. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.